Okay, I've got it recording and you guys can see my screen all good.
Yes, I can see. Thank
Perfect. Thanks,
you.
Vicky. Alrighty, good morning or afternoon, depending on what time you are watching watching this tutorial. But welcome to week 5. Um, I can't believe it's week 5, and I know I say this in my workshop. It is crazy. And just a heads up, if you see any strange activity behind me, I do have some window cleaner people present today at the Gold Coast campus. So, how fun! A little flavor. So, I would just like to acknowledge that I am on the beautiful Yugambeh country. The weather has been super bizarre lately. Um, but I'm very lucky to be living here and being so close to the beautiful ocean. So I'm very lucky for that. So Module 5, as we spoke about in Monday night's workshop, we're looking at all the pedagogical frameworks. I am very much aware to where you are about on your learning journey being a teacher, and I've been thinking about this quite a lot of understanding that word pedagogy. I know that can be quite confusing, so maybe you're at the end of your journey where you know exactly what pedagogy is, maybe in your master's and you're coming from a completely different background. So every time I'm talking about pedagogy, it's that teaching practice and that teaching style that you embed within your teaching. And we are looking at some pedagogies, particularly looking at that Aboriginal 8 ways of learning that you can incorporate into your teaching practice. So when we say pedagogy, this is another style. And again, you don't realize you're doing all of this until you kind of stop and reflect. So, inclusive pedagogy is where you're making sure that you're counting for everyone's diverse backgrounds, that you're incorporating different content and learning material, and that you're looking at everyone's individual learning needs and different approaches. So, as teachers, you will start to realize that you start to chop and change different materials or learning assessments to suit different students' needs, and you're already catering to doing your inclusive pedagogy, that your teaching practice. So, culturally responsive teaching, as I said, there is so many different avenues that makes you a culturally responsive teaching or a teacher. So, this 8 competencies, I usually show this in my EDUC6009 Learning in Diversity. But this is just a different style to have a look at to see, am I incorporating any of these competencies in my teaching practice or would like to incorporate when I go on prac or when I'm eventually out in the classroom. So, doing all of these things like reflecting on one's cultural lenses, again, that's you doing some self reflection on your own teaching. Are you bringing the real world issues into the classroom? Are you relating things authentically to the student's world? Are you recognizing any biases in the systems? Are you drawing on students' cultural understanding? Are you bringing that within the classroom? Are you promoting respect for all different students? Are you fostering inclusion? All of these things you probably do without even realizing, but it's really good to stop and take a moment to see, am I doing that? And I'm catering towards all the different cultural responsive teaching practices. So, what this can look like now for your early years, and if you are in the early years, looking at your ACEQA, it tells you what this can look like for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students for belonging, being, and becoming. And it's a really good starting point to reflect, and you can also use these key bullet points to write about. So it speaks about is educators critically reflecting and seeking assistance for engaging with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. Now, again, all these dot points are essentially for all teachers. Am I doing this in my practice? Am I creating a culturally safe space? What does that look like? Am I regularly assessing myself and my attitude and interactions? Again, it comes back to you and your unconscious biases and reflecting on your teaching practice. Is educators actively researching the wider Australian reconciliation and what's occurring in community? Again, that's a really important thing as well. Is anything big happening in community that you should be aware of? I know that I was speaking to a colleague and she's down in Melbourne, and she said they just done, Melbourne have just signed off on their first reconciliation agreement for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. That's just recently happened. I think she said last Wednesday. So all of these things is to be really aware of what's happening, and it supports you in your teaching practice, but also develops that relationship with your students and their families. So, what do you already know about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education frameworks? There is quite a lot out there and it can feel quite overwhelming, or you may not know any at all. So, I've just got some dot points here to think about. So, when we look about at the Australian cross curriculum priority, that's helping and assisting a framework for our teaching practice. Our Australian curriculum framework for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages, national Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education strategies, and then obviously our most predominant one, our 8 Aboriginal ways of learning. On Monday night in the workshop, I did show a framework from the Department of Education in New South Wales. There is so many out there that can guide our practice. It's good to do a bit of research, and if you find one that you really love, stick to that to help guide your framework and your teaching practice and kind of unpack it to what suits you and your students. So the 8 Ways Pedagogy by Tyson Yunker Porter, as it says there, it's merely a starting point. How do you unpack this and what does it mean to you and your local ways of doing and being in your local community? So this is on the 8 Ways website and it breaks down what each strand means. So your story sharing, learning maps, non-verbal, symbols and images, land links, non-linear, deconstruct and reconstruct, and community links. It gives you information about what each element can be. And then they've given you a little snippet of how Indigenous people learn through their cultural ways. So as we know, we connect through stories, we picture pathways of knowledges, we see, think, and act and make and share with our words. We keep and share knowledge. We work with lessons from land and nature. We put different ideas to get together and create new knowledge. We work from whole parts, 2 parts, watching, then doing, and we bring new knowledge home to help mob. So this is what was intended to be used in Western Sydney. And if you have not done it yet, I do really highly recommend doing the activity that was in last week's tutorial where you unpack what the 8 ways mean to you, because that's how you are embedding it authentically. It does help to have a look at what other people are doing, and then you can change and manipulate that within your classroom. I've also taken this snippet, it's very much the same, but what I like about this is it says, you can see here the common ground between Western and Aboriginal pedagogy. And I think that's also a really great link for you to have a look at and unpack what that could mean to you. And looking at those links, so sharing, my goodness, my words are a little bit over the place today. Story sharing, it could be those personal narratives. If you are looking at land links, so place-based learning, are we looking at drawing from living landscape with the framework of relationships with place? Are we looking at that deconstruct, reconstruct, where we talk about modeling and scaffolding, working from whole to parts? That could also mean scaffolding and independent learning. What this to me looks, shows is Martin Nakader's cultural complex understanding where Indigenous and Western ways can go together. And I think that's really important. They go hand in hand to help one another. So don't always exclude each and just stick to Indigenous ways or just stick to Western ways. I think they can be beautifully brought together because they do very much go hand in hand and can be seen very similar. So yesterday I went to Himbyumby school up in near Ipswich, and I was in a year 5-6 class for the whole day, unpacking some research with them. But what I found really interesting about this independent school is that it is an Indigenous school about ways of knowing, being, and doing. So they do their classrooms very different to state schools and private schools. They have a different way of teaching, which I think is really, really awesome. And I think a lot of teachers should definitely go out or try and get a casual day up there if you are up here on the Gold Coast or Brisbane. Or I've also popped this 2017 annual report for you to have a little look at. but it is a prep to year 12 school. And what they do is they have the Australian curriculum, however, they embed the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges and ways of doing. And I've just popped a little snippet here of how they do their processes. So they, of course, have acknowledgement. Yesterday, the students did an acknowledgement of country in language, which was really beautiful. They do yarning circles a lot to collaborate. They do sing songs in language, fostering jar jump sense of identity. So when we say jar jumps, that just means student or child. So I saw a lot of the teachers yesterday referring to all the students as jar jumps, and they weren't just saying the students. So just incorporating certain elements like that, which you can do in your classroom. They actually have a language development program that comes into the school for the students, but also for the teachers to upskill them. So I was talking to the deputy principal for the primary years, asking how do your teachers feel if they are non-Indigenous and they are working here in this environment? Are they scared to teach Aboriginal perspectives? And of course, the answer is yes. However, it's all about being open and learning from any mistakes and taking as much professional development as possible. So if you are doing all the professional development to upskill yourself, you feel more confident to embed it within your classroom. And what I liked about this is with one of the language teachers that come in, she speaks the local Indigenous language there and then shares it with the students. But she said to the teachers who were also learning, if you grew up learning a different language, if English isn't your first language, if you went to high school and you learned Japanese or French, we are all going to pronounce names or words in different ways or a different sound. So it's okay if you don't pronounce certain Indigenous words the same as someone else, because again, we all have that different way of speaking. And that's something to really think about and go, okay, it's okay if that sounds a little bit different, because we are all different and all of our upbringings. But I think that is really powerful to not be scared and just try. So, looking at the 8 ways, the teacher was sharing with me that they incorporate the Aboriginal 8 ways framework in their pedagogy. And I asked how their teachers do it. And again, in the side of their classroom, they had these symbols up on their classroom walls. And she said they would embed this throughout different subjects. And what they noticed was it could easily be done within science lessons, within English lessons, and doing it authentically means if you are breaking things apart or unpacking an English lesson, usually what I've done in the past, if I had a rubric or I had an example of an essay for students, I would cut them up and then get them to piece it together where they thought each paragraph would go to then form a full essay again. Those certain types of things is where you're using those Indigenous 8 ways of learning authentically. So when speaking to the deputy principal yesterday, she was saying that, which was really interesting and something that we should all think about, and I'm definitely going to be reflecting on this. For their year 11 and 12 students, they went really hard with giving all of the students literature books that were all First Nation perspectives. And what they noticed was when the students went to do the HSC or ATAR subjects, they were really lacking because they didn't focus much on what other schools are focusing on. So again, it was a bit of a disadvantage for their students at Himbiamba. So that was something they've reflected on. So this year, they're making sure that all perspectives are shown, all Indigenous authors and First Nation representatives, but also other different perspectives as well to give that whole visualization for the students. But that was something that really made me reflect as well, that we can't always do these Aboriginal 8 ways of learning in every single subject, but where you feel that it fits authentically, then that's all you can do and try your best. So went on a bit of a tangent talking about this school yesterday. But with this, the Department of Education have shared this style of processing, and I do show this in my other unit as well. I think it is really handy to have this on file if you ever need to reflect to it, because I know sometimes you can go down the rabbit hole or overanalyze it and go, oh, what does that deconstruct and reconstruct really mean to me? This can also be a bit of a starting point to maybe unpack what you want it to be. So within this, it gives you all different styles of how you can embed this in your classroom practice. So they give you what the process means, how can you align this with an Aboriginal pedagogy, and then how would you communicate this with students? If you had non-Indigenous students, what does this process actually mean? And I think this is really important because it's going to help your teaching practice as well. And maybe unpack again, like I said, what does it mean to you? It may not mean the same as what they're saying, but you are authentically doing it in your teaching. If you've got high school students, you could break down what do you think nonlinear means and have a whole classroom around that. And speaking of that, yesterday with the principal, she was saying that for a whole week they get their teachers to not teach curriculum for the first year, like that first year of their first. So if they've just got a new year six class for that first week, they don't teach content. It's all about getting to know their students, who their students are. The students get to learn who the teachers are to develop that relationship. So I really do encourage you, don't worry about content for the first week. And I know it's scary because you need to hit a lot. If you can embed it throughout, absolutely, but make sure you're really putting that work into getting to know your students. I think that is so important. And in that first week, you can unpack what is nonlinear. How do you learn? How can we embed this in our own teaching practice? So definitely save this link. It's going to help you over time to unpack the Aboriginal 8 ways of learning. And again, you may go to different schools and see it being approached in different ways. And I encourage you to take and pull from all different avenues to create it your own. This, again, it is completely different. It's the same teaching pedagogy, Aboriginal 8 ways of learning. This is for the early years framework. And again, they're saying if you're using this framework and you're conveying high expectations for all students, you're going to see growth. You're going to see a sense of belonging in your classroom. So they unpack again, what does the 8 ways mean? How can we relate that to their own early years framework? So their early years framework is based on strong sense of identity, connection, connected with and contribute to their world, sense of well-being, and involved with learners and effective communicators. And they have labeled where each belongs to. Again, you can do that within the Australian curriculum. You can do that with your school rules. It can really link to how you want it to link. And that's how you're doing this authentically. Again, I've just linked it here. How can you connect it? So again, non-linear, producing innovations and understanding by thinking laterally or combining new systems. Deconstruct modeling and scaffolding. Community links, again, looking at different viewpoints, having community come in. They're just all different ways to think about it and how can it look like in your center. This is another fantastic PowerPoint that I have that I've sourced off the internet. Again, unpacking, we don't want you. Unpacking the 8 ways of learning. So here they speak about examples. Again, this is because it's Western Sydney. This is where the 8 ways of pedagogy was developed and who for. But they speak about how can this be used. So in Lightning Ridge, they used 4 of the 8 pedagogies to develop a way to deliver their school rules. How beautiful. This is when I mean it's authentic. If you have your own set of classroom rules, how can I align this with the 8 ways pedagogy? And you're incorporating that authentically. Another one here, the 8 ways of learning. They've got all artifacts here, community, whole to part, place-based knowledges, journey and learning maps, narratives. Just by using artifacts and having conversations with them, again, can line up to the 8 ways of learning. They're giving you information here about story sharing. What can you do for community links? What does this mean to my family? Again, making sure you're even connecting to your students' families. It could be any of the students in your classroom. If they're from overseas, making sure that you're having that connection with them. Again, you're using community links. You're using that in an authentic way. Your learning maps, how does that look within the classroom? It might be a learning map of how you're going to unpack that certain subject or that certain content that you are teaching, especially if you're teaching narrative writing, unpacking learning maps. How are we going to write this narrative? We need this first, we need this first, we need certain adverbs, we need certain adjectives. If you are mapping this all out, you're using this style approach authentically. Again, I always say you may not realize you're doing it. So this is a really great link to understand how could I impact this? What are some examples? They even say that you can use this as a behavior management tool. Again, that's your teaching practice, your teaching pedagogy. Behavior management is very crucial as well. So the 8 ways of learning, I love this video. I showed in my other unit. I think it's really important to see how other people see 8 ways of learning, especially coming from young people's mouths who are doing this.
I'm the Aboriginal Education Coordinator at Cleveland Public School, and we have brought a number of children from Year 5 and 6 to share with you the 8 ways of Aboriginal learning pedagogy today. They are not nervous at all. They are going to do a wonderful job and they're going to be great ambassadors for our school.
So I started off with this big learning map and then I broke it down to explain all the different places we went through.
So my learning map, obviously school, tree, houses, McDonald's, and then bushes, and then 7-Eleven.
There's the Aboriginal flag, the Australian flag, and the Parramatta Eels flag.
There's a lot of bushes. I saw stop signs, some buses, more jacarandas, bushes.
Inspected a hospital, and then I got to Parramatta, and I drove all the way down into the car park.
I think symbols and images is a good one. I think we can show a lot through our pictures and our diagrams.
So everybody in this room has a journey. We're connecting. We're connecting people. We're connecting ideas. We're connecting different parts of the world together.
I really like the opportunity to learn in a very different way than I typically have learned in school. I'm a teacher myself and I definitely want to be bringing some of these types of learning into my maths classroom.
As a high school educator, we're used to telling students to write copious amounts of notes, and I think that it was so powerful to see the learning that could come from one symbol and how much dialogue could emerge from that. So the dialogic approach, I think, was really essential.
Young student was at our table leading the conversation, and I think that's inspiring to think that we should be taking time to listen to all generations.
This is what we do at school. This is how they teach. This is how they learn. As I said, this is how we plan. And it is really embedded in what we do. So I want to absolutely thank you as a proud principal, but I'm sure everybody else will thank their table leaders.
What I loved about that is how the students and the teachers had printed out the symbols so they could have conversations of what it meant for them, how they got to that certain point and having conversations. What's similar to that is I'm currently working on doing a resource that has the 8 ways of learning and then the Western ways of how students learn, which is through either kinesthetic, audio, visual. And I'm trying to say again that cultural interface, Western ways and Indigenous ways really do go hand in hand. So thinking about what type of learner you are, you can think about, am I a visual person? Or do I like to hear things? Or am I kinesthetic where I need to touch and move? They really relate to those 8 ways of learning as well. So that's just a different way for you to probably unpack and go, hey, they really do relate as correlations. And how can I use that in my classroom? And I know I keep saying the word authentic. But if you are doing it just like that, then there is no reason to feel scared in doing this in your classroom because you have justification. You should be confident in what you're doing and teaching. So don't feel scared to use these. I did sneakily take a photo yesterday in the school. What I loved about it is they had a yarning circle protocols. Such a beautiful little thing that's in the corner. The students knew what it meant. They knew the protocols of it. But I'm just going to read it. So enter the space respectfully and in clockwise direction. Do not walk across the center of the circle, break line of the circle. All participants must be seated. Should someone arrive late, they must enter the space respectfully and join the circle at the entry point. Each yarn should always start with a welcome to country or acknowledgement of country, followed by check-in, then the topic of discussion. Use respectful language and turn taking. Again, do not rush the conversation or be quick to reply. The handling of the item, they had a message stick that they showed me. Handling of the item around the circle helps us to think before we speak, repeat the place, and keep it clean and tidy. I think that's really beautiful that they've created a set of protocols to then begin their days or have conversations about certain things in their subjects through a yarning circle protocol. I think that's very beautiful and very authentic. If you ever want to do that within your classroom, I highly recommend it. You could always reach out to an Aboriginal education officer and say, I would like to create some yarning protocols for my classroom. What's necessary? And if you have that in your classroom, students are going to respect that, and it has really beautiful dialogue for students. But yeah, there was lots of little things in the classroom that I went, wow, how beautiful that people can just incorporate that. And it should be done quite a lot. Even for high school, it doesn't necessarily mean really sitting in a circle. It may be done in a different way, but just different ways that you can think of. So I do have a little case study. Who do we have in here? I know Karen's high school. Do I have all high school or primary in here? Marley, are you primary or high school?
I'm primary.
Okay, beautiful. Look, Mickey, what are you?
I'm a early childhood.
Early childhood. Okay. So if you're in early childhood, read that bottom paragraph. If you're primary high school, read that top paragraph. They're very much similar. So at Smithfield School, the staff organises a big NAIDOC week every year, which includes guest speakers, arts, crafts. However, outside of this week, there's little focus on Aboriginal perspectives or culture in the curriculum. Classroom displays are mostly generic, rarely reflect local history, and teachers don't actively incorporate perspectives. Sarah is Aboriginal and comes from a family that is very connected to country, but she finds after NAIDOC week, the classroom and school environment feels disconnected from her culture. Sarah and her classmates have limited exposure to Aboriginal content throughout the rest of the year. Again, it's very similar to the early childhood. Ella, a young child, comes from a family deeply connected to country. Again, after NAIDOC week, there's not many discussions or activity. She often asks questions about her family and culture, but doesn't see much about it in the centre, making her feel a bit unsure compared to her peers. So, what barriers exist for Indigenous students like Sarah and Ella in schools that only celebrate Aboriginal culture during NAIDOC week, and how can these barriers be addressed? Anyone want to have a go? And again, this is quite common in a lot of schools.
Sorry, Madison, what was the question? I was reading at the same time and my brain blanked you out.
That's okay. So what barriers exist for students like Ella and Sarah in schools that only celebrate Indigenous culture during NAIDOC week? And how can we address these barriers? Or what could we do?
I feel like doing the NAIDOC stuff at school is great, but it seems quite tokenistic. And especially if people like using that as but we did the NAIDOC week activities, we're all sweet for the year. And I think that's because NAIDOC week is all Indigenous groups, they're not focusing specifically on their local groups. This would be the teachers and the school. So for me, I would be looking like for those local connections, which is, you know, some of the stuff in the current assessment that we're writing. How do you connect with local Indigenous groups, and how then do you get that into the classroom?
Yep.
To support the students, just to acknowledgement, like how can you have that just as a regular part of the day in the classroom? And you can't do that unless you're finding the specific local knowledge as opposed to the broader, you know, everyone's included for NAIDOC week.
Yeah.
But you need to drill down and look more closely at your personal location.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Karen. And like you said a few weeks ago too, at the school you were doing a placement on, I think you said it was through NAIDOC week or maybe the Year 12 end of celebration, and there was those beautiful moldy dances.
Yeah, it was the year 12 walkout. I'll just that it was like it was completely spontaneous and everybody knew what to do, and people ran off and grabbed didgeridoos, and they were like playing music and dancing, doing traditional dance as the walkout happened. And, you know, everybody, even the non-Indigenous people students already knew that like we'll take turns, and the Indigenous students did their like traditional performance, and then it moved into some of the other cultures. There was Tongan students and Samoan students, and it was like unorganized, but it was really lovely that it just happened, and everyone waited, and everyone, you know, like everyone was really enjoying themselves without that, oh well, we better do this kind of attitude. It just happened, and it was really lovely.
Yep. And that's when students do that so naturally, it's because they know they're so supported within this school and it's going to be appreciated and valued. And in those instances when it's only happening through NAIDOC week, and again, I always try and say you don't have control over executive and leadership. So if they're not doing much, I know it feels very hard, but you can only have control what's in your classroom. So I'd go that step further and go, hey, what happened at NAIDOC week? What were those families that were involved, and how can I even reach out to them and say, hey, I loved what your family did last week. I would love to have more conversations with you and bring that perspective into my classroom. And then you begin that relationship that it's not only reaching out every week through NAIDOC, and families love it. They love to come in and go, yes, I would love to share what I do with the cooking or my cultural background or the specific dances. So if you ever see some amazing things through NAIDOC week from community members, go and introduce yourself. And I know it's so scary, but introduce yourself, speak about what you loved or how you'd love to work together. And then that has created a really beautiful start to a potential relationship. And the more relationships you have, they're going to expand and say, hey, I know this person, or I know this auntie and this elder that can actually come in as well. Yeah, Karen.
Just to add to it, because I think the school I went to just did all of these things really, really well. Like in terms of knowing the students, the teacher that was my like mentor teacher, he knew all the kids' business, and he knew who was going fishing on the weekend, to the point where he was bringing in like fishing equipment, and they were going through it and swapping, you know, like hooks and lures. Like he just knew everybody, like everybody's backgrounds, and he was on the, you know, Monday morning, oh, how's your weekend? Did you go here? What did you do with the fish when you got it? You know, like it was very, very like friendship based. And I don't know if that's the word that you meant to use, but he took personal interest in everybody, and I think that worked really well. Kids would come to him to tell him what they were doing. I thought was really nice. And the other thing, I did participate in a history class, and they had a stolen generation person as like to share her story, and the children, all those students all took notes and everything, and then they worked through. So she was like a primary source, I guess, when you're talking about history. So that, like, it's really, really, I felt the best example of being inclusive that I've heard about or seen, which was really good. So
that is beautiful. I loved trying to really make those connections, because when you've got that beautiful relationship with the students, it blossoms within the classroom and outside of the classroom. Especially for teachers like that man, if you are scared to do that, or you're having to have a conversation with a student, go to that person and say, hey, do you have any information on Harry? Or do you have what's Harry like and what's his hobbies? Because I really want to try and build a connection. That's really important as well, making that effort. Even I was speaking yesterday in the classroom and they were saying, so there's about, I think they said 89% of Indigenous students at Himbayumba, and the 10% is non-Indigenous students. And there was one particular girl in that year 6 class that was non-Indigenous, but her mother wanted her to go to this school to make her daughter learn that everyone's allies and you can learn with Aboriginal students, learn about Aboriginal culture and knowledge. And what they did is they had that IATSIS map up, and some people were talking about where their mob's from or what country they live on. And for the non-Indigenous students, it was just pointing out like we do, oh, I live here, I live on the Gold Coast here, and that means I live on Yugambeh country. And then just speaking about relatives they have. That is so beautifully authentic. Still using that 8 ways of learning, you're still connecting, you're understanding where your students are from. And one of the elders was actually in and she said her surname, and then some of the students were like, oh, I'm actually related to you, which was really cute. So just unpacking more information, you build that sense of belonging. So I just had a quick list here about potential barriers. So those tokenistic, exactly what Karen said. It feels tokenistic when schools just celebrate NAIDOC week for 1 week and then they move on. It's a conscious decision. It's like a conscious decision that we have to make sure everyone feels included in the school environment. It's a conscious decision that we have to make sure we're teaching the curriculum or the content. That's just one of those avenues that we have to be conscious about doing them and integrating those. That lack of cultural continuity, so not having those different perspectives, limited teacher understanding, so not doing enough professional development, like that video I showed a few weeks ago from a student in Victoria that said, how did it feel to be an Indigenous student at Victoria in this certain school? And she said there's lots of racism and that teachers need more professional development to support them. And that was only a year ago. So there's students are still saying that teachers are still not getting enough professional development to help with culture. So that's just different things to think about. So looking at your culturally responsive pedagogy and what can you do to embed perspectives across the year is ongoing. It's an ongoing thing. So looking at those classroom displays, yes, you can have those wonderful displays, but also try and utilize them. Just don't leave them abandoned. How can you incorporate that in your teaching or kind of link to it or have it in the back? Looking at your curriculum integration. So English, you're using oral storytelling. Are you looking at authors, math? There's lots of different styles that you can do with maths. All of these different style curriculum integration, again, links to that 8 ways pedagogy. Your social emotional development is also super duper important because it makes sure that they have that sense of identity as well. Looking at ongoing learning opportunities, real world applications, and then your own teacher capacity. Always link to real world application. Know your students, where they come from, and the community that they're in. Students will learn way better than something that they have no idea what's it about. You're not linking it to their knowledge. So this here is about an Aboriginal education strategy. I'm going to play it and then I want you to see what common theme did you notice from it. And it's about proud and confident learners.
I think the biggest change that I have seen within the school with our Aboriginal students is how confident and proud they are. And that has come down to building a culturally safe environment, and we have done that.
I want the kids to be learning so that a language can be alive forever. They love coming to school. When they do their good work, they get happy and excited, proud.
Just seeing their connection and their confidence build is really something special to watch.
The growth since the start of the year in their writing levels has been outstanding.
Bilingual learning actually improves outcomes for kids. The more confident, the more happy they are, the more they learn. It's as simple as that.
Having strong role models for our young people is super important. You can't be what you can't see.
Doing the apprenticeship, it kind of gives you a direct route into your career after school.
I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Secondary Education, and after finishing this degree I really want to work in Aboriginal education.
When I grow up, I kind of want to become like a forensic scientist, and that uses a lot of STEM.
What I love about my job is being with the kids and just teaching them my knowledge.
Other students can view me as a role model and a leader. I can inspire them to continue their education.
When I see young people having a really positive experience in their education, then identifying that they want to go on and give back to community and teach the younger generation of Aboriginal students, it's just super inspiring.
What common theme did you notice in that quick snippet video?
There was a big emphasis on making culturally safe environments.
Yeah.
And a lot of the teachers also believe that like the more confident their students became, the more they learnt.
Absolutely. And that's the main thing. Confident, how are you getting them to feel confident is because you're making them feel like they belong within the classroom. You're looking at those strengths of students, then their confidence, you're bringing it in, and then you start to see that academic growth. And I know I hate saying that academic growth, but schools do love that. And yes, it's great. We're making them achieve their personal best with academic, but it is really important. You're building on that well-being part as well. Confident and happy learners, even speaking about how those role models and where other people are at. But that's really important when you're thinking about that assignment reflection question, that sense of belonging, reaching out to community, making sure that they feel valued in the classroom, that they see themselves within the classroom. So another style of embedding Indigenous perspectives, again, it's a different style framework. Framework is just different ways that you can embed into your practice, and they're all very similar. So embedding Indigenous perspectives is these things: understanding Indigenous protocols. Are you having or developing strong community partnerships? Are you looking at your own professional and personal accountabilities? It always comes back to you as a teacher. Understanding your students and their community. Everything that we've spoken about over the past 5 weeks is a framework for embedding Indigenous perspectives. It doesn't just mean picking up a book and we're speaking about Indigenous author. If you're doing all of these things, you're really trying hard on your teaching pedagogy to embed Indigenous perspectives. And then up the top here, it talks about, are you got that community engagement? Are you looking at the curriculum? Are you looking at yourself as the teacher? And are you looking at your classroom environment? All of those go hand in hand. Again, you could be doing this as you're in the classroom. You're like, wow, I really do all of these. I've just never realized it because I've always been quite scared when addressing Indigenous perspectives. And then this is also another amazing checklist that schools can use to look at how am I embedding Indigenous perspectives. There's different phases. So phase 1 to phase 4. So it's uninformed, aware, engaged, and mobilized. And some schools like to track where they are at on this. It tells you the criteria. So am I looking at that personal and professional accountability? And they say in the school, all teachers should have understanding of local Indigenous knowledges. And I think this is why for those 2 assessments, we've really tried to hone in about your own community and bringing that in. Understanding your own perspectives and beliefs. Again, that's why in tutorial 2, we really tried to unpack your own unconscious biases. Understanding shared history of the local area, what's around you, what land are you on, what's happened in this community. I'm looking at your organizational environment. Then it speaks about here, schools and teachers are aware of likely sensitivity issues and have appropriate strategies in place. And that's when I talk about that trauma-informed practice. So when you are doing something, you may need to utilize that trauma-informed practice, which just means you're making sure that all students are safe and comfortable in the classroom. You've got spaces for them to go to when they feel uncomfortable, if you're bringing up situations that may make them feel uncomfortable. Protocols and processes in place to check whether Indigenous knowledge is presented is culturally appropriate for the local area. So again, using that IATSIS guideline to help support you, you're using that as evidence to say, hey, I'm trying to do the right thing. I can also reach out if I've got an Indigenous education officer or teacher in your school that can also help support you with that. Reaching out to any of those partnerships. You may even be reaching out to the families that are in your classroom to say, hey, do you know about this? Or would you feel comfortable in coming in and helping me share this? And then looking at that curriculum and pedagogy. So local Indigenous stories. Again, as you can see, it's all about local. And like I said in the assignment 1, yes, that's totally fine to use different resources from different places, but how does that connect to your local land as well? Or maybe it really, it doesn't. So this one is about building relationships at a school in Central Australia, Menindee. And I'm hoping that this may, again, you can, all these videos I'm also showing can help support your writing if you need anything for that reflection number 1. As you can see, my wonderful window cleaners in the background.
I'm Fiona Kelly. I'm a local Menindee girl and I'm lucky enough to be the executive principal here at Menindee Central School. Menindee, tiny little community, 112 k's away from Broken Hill, but we're about 1100 k's from Sydney. Menindee is different in that we do have a lot of local people employed here. So for the students, there's a lot of role models and there's an expectation that, you know, we're going to do what's right for the kids.
Engaging parents in Menindee, it's different because even though we might be related by blood, like sometimes it's not all, they've had a negative experience with the school. Some of my parents like to do Facebook, Messenger, some like Snapchat, and others like a phone call. Others don't even want any of that. They don't want a letter or nothing. They want you to call around and have a cup of tea. And it's not just as simple as giving them a form to sign and then leaving, because you break down that relationship then. So
I'm just stopping that there. So please don't feel pressured to ever give your Facebook. I know as teachers we actually have to sign documentation to say that obviously we can't be friends with parents on Facebook type of platforms. However, if you do have an Aboriginal education officer within your school or an Indigenous assistant, depends what the school has. So my old school, the Aboriginal education officer had a mobile phone that was actually purchased from the school. It was a school mobile phone, and that's how a lot of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families like to communicate, through text. So I would go through that teacher to then communicate to the parents because they would not like using documentation. So just finding out different avenues to in your school. Just, the school have a mobile phone that we use to send texts. Some of the schools also have Facebook pages to advertise or to share things. So parents might like to share stuff through there, and you have to speak about who has the access to that as well. So don't ever give out your personal information. That is just to protect yourself, but find out who within your school does use those different types of avenues that's owned by the school itself.
we have an assembly every second week. We have a lucky door prize, and then afterwards we go down and the hospitality kids will make scones or muffins or something, and then we come down to staff room, and the teachers, if they don't have classes, will often join us. Each term we do a theme. So last term 1 we had Harmony Day. This term's major community projects NAIDOC week, so we'll be involved in having an assembly later in the week for them and get the kids down, get some dancers in, some artists.
With the dancer, he's working with each of the classes, and then we're going to identify kids that, you know, were really interested and were keen. But also, like, he'll work with lot of the adults. A lot of people, you know, like they were brought onto the missions. When they were on the missions, they couldn't speak the language, they couldn't do the dance. So there was just so much of our culture that was lost. Dance, art, and that's just a great way of, you know, making sure that everybody is represented.
I love NAIDOC Week. It's a chance for us to celebrate our culture. And it's just good seeing like the older community come in, and like I know for a fact that they would never have come back into the school. But now they come in, they feel like, I think they feel that it's safe, friendly environment and welcoming, and it's good that they can come in and see their grandkids and kids perform, achieve.
I can go down any time and over yarn with Fiona. I'll go down to visit the classrooms. You're always welcome in the girls' classrooms. Their teachers are really nice teachers.
We haven't always had a great relationship with our parents. Parents didn't feel like they were welcome in the school. So the Yarn Up Circle, it was an idea of one of the local people in the AECG, and it's just a big circle that was done by the community.
We had the local police force donate the bricks, cement to make the yarning circle, and it was a big day. We have a garden up there as well.
We've had some people who have, you know, the first time that they went to the Yarn Up Circle was the first time they'd been at school since they were in schools. And this is just a great way to start the conversations with our parents and our community.
What we've got now in the relationship with the community and the Aboriginal people being able to be part of the school is huge. We had a principal come in that willingly took the padlocks off and let Aboriginal people and consulted with Aboriginal people, because a lot of people in Menindee are really concerned about their children's education, and we want the best. Like we say, we might be a small school, but our kids are entitled to top education.
If you are in New South Wales, definitely reach out to the AECG trying to attend any of those meetings. Yesterday, I found out that the Himby School, they do like gatherings with all either the state and private schools in that area, where all of the kids go to Himbyumba and they do programs and activities, and then another time they go to a different school and they encourage teachers to go as well to see and create that community aspect. So any school that you do go to, I highly recommend asking how do you reach out to community, and what community places do you have coming to the school? Because if you don't know, then if you don't know what's happening, then you don't end up attending them. So any key takeaways that you heard from that video? I would say the most thing that we always keep speaking about is developing those relationships, and how important it is to connect to community, making everyone feel valued, safe, heard, and seen. Like we want for any child, especially even us as adults, we want to feel valued, heard, and seen, and have that sense of belonging. So we extend that into your classroom. So 5 elements of the parent and community engagement framework. Again, there's so many different frameworks out there. I always say, have a look, read up, what can you take and pull from each one to help guide your practice. So this one speaks about how can you bring community in. Again, this doesn't necessarily mean it's just for Indigenous children, but you can use this for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So making sure that you've got that effective communication, you're communicating with the parents, communities, providing opportunities to share, partnership with parents, making sure that you're promoting student learning and well-being. And again, that word we always hear is having those high expectations. Community collaboration, I know that can be quite a lot, especially in a jam-packed schedule of a teacher, but do try, even if it's just once in one of your units, that you've tried to reach out to community or have different people come and help develop your programs or have their ideas implemented throughout. Looking at decision making, it's not always up to you sometimes, but you can have the role of decision making within your classroom. And then school culture as well. So these are just different frameworks that you can use to help bring community and engage them into your teaching practice. Now, this is from the Department of Education, and this would be your grey literature as well to help support why you're writing about this. This is just an example of what I've done when I was teaching. As I've said before, I would hold a termly yarn up with our parents, and I would create a little poster like this, pop it onto our school Facebook page. Another teacher was running that. They'd pop that up there, and a lot of families ended up coming. We created such a beautiful safe space for the families, and I would always encourage all teachers to come as well to build that bridge in supporting the teachers and those families' relationships. And families never can say no to a free food or free sausage sizzle or free cup of tea with some bickies. If you've always got food around, you're always going to bring people in, and always speak to people in your school to say, hey, is there any funding or can this be used? That's really important as well. So having a look at those 8 ways of learning, I want you to choose 3 elements. And I want you to think about how you could incorporate that in your lesson. So if you're doing science or if you're doing art, how would you embed an activity using one of those? And then I want you to share just one with me. Now, the point of this activity is to share your ideas, but to also know your idea is not going to be wrong because it's going to be authentically, it's authentic because it's meaningful to you. And that's what I'm trying to say. If you use these 8 ways of learning or 8 ways pedagogy, it's guiding your practice and you're still using it authentically. So everyone is going to be different. Your deconstruct, reconstruct might be different to someone else as well, but that's okay. You're using this framework to guide your practice. So I'll give you about 5 minutes. I want you to choose one, and then I want you to tell me how you would incorporate that in one of your lessons. I'm more than happy to post any of those links to help guide your understanding. Karen.
I was just going to ask, I've read it a few times, but I'd love just to hear you clarify it if you can, the non-verbal one, because I sort of feel like, is that similar to the deconstruct, reconstruct in that it's a practical one? I'd just love to hear your opinion on how you would describe the non-verbal element.
Yeah, so again, what I love about that is it can be different to everyone. So I usually would say the non-verbal is either using body language or hands-on learning activities. So that non-verbal really would go in, it could be, where was I seeing? That non-verbal could either easily be linked with symbols and images as well, because if you're using symbols and images and not speaking, if you're using learning maps as well, because you can create learning maps with not speaking, and that's non-verbal. So again, it's up to your own interpretation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I that's what I sort of gathered from it. I really like it.
Yeah.
It doesn't you can't, I felt like I couldn't really explain it when
yeah.
So I was just wondering, and you've confirmed that it flows across a lot of different areas.
Yes. They all interrelate. Even if you're doing a drama performance piece and students are using body language or they're trying to convey an idea without not using verbal cues, you're using that authentically within drama. It's always having that, you kind of stop and go, wow, I'm actually using this Indigenous 8 ways of learning without even realizing we're doing it.
Yeah, for me, I thought an example of non-verbal is if you show, because I'm doing visual arts, as you know, teaching, if someone's looking at an artwork for an extended period, not just glancing, like your eyes are reading all over it.
Yep.
And you're getting information and sensory feedback from without any words or any actions. You're just watching.
Yes.
And the artwork sort of speaks to you.
Yes.
Without saying anything. That was my interpretation.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, I also thought it fit into that, like you said, the practical applications where you're watching someone do something and learning that way and then doing it yourself, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I guess when I was speaking about the Western ways of audio, visual, kinesthetic. It would also be like kinesthetic as well, nonverbal, touching, feeling, smelling, sense. Um, yeah, it's definitely how you would like to interpret and then use that within your classroom, and that's how it's authentic. And that's how I always say too, if you ever feel scared to do it, you can justify and go, well, this is what it means to us in our classroom. And that's, yeah, you can never go wrong with that. And you would always say, well, I would love to learn more about how do you use it in your area. Or if you had an elder come in and say, what does that mean to you? And how can I add to my tools of what I do already? Even like that non-linear too, thinking about math, like everyone gets an answer in a different way, especially in primary when you have to teach different ways of addition and subtraction and help students understand which way works best for them. Definitely non-linear. You're finding different avenues to get to the end result. Definitely like if you're using breaking down differentiation for assessments, if students prefer doing like an essay style, but you have students that can't even write a full essay and you're changing that, again, that's your non-linear. They're learning in different ways, but coming to that end result. I'll give you 2 more minutes and then you can share an ID with me. Yeah, would anyone like to share? I should have had some pretty weighty music in the background while we're sitting there. What element would you choose and how would you do or use or incorporate this in a lesson or an activity? Again, no answer is wrong because it's how you interpret this. Karen.
Thought I'd get the ball rolling. I feel like mine is quite easy because it's such a visual learning area, and I'm sure people doing like mathematics or commerce or something would struggle. But mine I found really easy. So I would pick story sharing, the non-verbal and land links. And my example for land links would be creating artwork based around a location in your area. So you can either go there, like ideally be able to go there and spend time there and then interpret that in art. That, like, I think that's because everybody comes up with something different, I think. Like you can't, especially if you don't have to stick to we're gonna create what it looks like. You know, instead you're creating like feeling or what you remember later, or focus in on one little area or stand right back out and do the whole area. Like there's lots of different ways that people can interpret the same space in a landscape. So I think that would be really nice.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Karen. Anyone else?
I'll give another one if.
Yeah, do it, Karen. We
I'll
love
just
it.
do it. It's like other people can have a go, but I thought I might as well just give some options. So my story sharing one was obviously because I'm doing history as well.
Yeah.
The having people share their stories, and I like the school that did it that I was at. I just thought that would be so amazing. Like as a history nerd, that is my dream to go in and have someone share their personal experience and hear it directly from someone who was there. So I think that sharing stories that way is so valuable.
Yeah.
Because you get all the emotion, like you said, the body language, like that non verbal as well.
Yeah.
Like it is words that they're sharing, but at the same time, you're getting the vibe off the person as well.
Yes.
Which I think you can't get that from the internet or from books or anything.
No,
So
no.
story sharing to me would be really, really excellent for history subjects, I would think.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And if you're ever in that situation, always, if you don't know how or who to get in contact with, Healing Foundation is awesome, as I've shown before, because they have stolen generation survivors that actually help contribute to stories and all of their learning resources. But I've had a person from Healing Foundation come out to my old workplace and we had conversations about certain things. So you can always reach out to them and say, I would love, do you have anyone that would love to come out to our school and share a story? That's another awesome place to go to because they're there to help support teachers as well. So that's another little way to connect out to community. Anyone else feeling brave?
I'm not sure if I've done it or if I'm just sort of overcomplicating it, but I chose learning maps. And I think because I'm going to be a primary teacher, I would use it to sort of show like the learning that we're going to do for like a unit of work, like for HSIE or something.
Yep.
Use a more of a visual approach and draw like a map for the kids to be like, this is where we're starting, this is where we're going to go, this is how it's going to look, and this is what we're going to achieve by doing it this way.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's awesome. I always say if you ever feel stuck, just think about how do I learn? How do my students learn? Do they like hands-on things? Like I said, do they like kinesthetic? Are they visual learners? Are they auditory? And then link it to that. Go, oh, a lot of them learn through kinesthetic. Then we can either do those learning maps and break down tasks and how do we get there? Even when they were talking about behavior as well, learning maps a lot is when you have if you've got a lot of either defiant or students that need a lot of structure and they have those on their desk, especially for primary schools of, okay, the first break on this lesson, we're doing this, or you can move the smiley face to this point, or when you've done 2 sets of tasks, you get to move to this point, and they have a visual chart in front of them. That is a learning map as well. So all these different things that you connect it to. That authentically goes in your teaching pedagogy. So it can be easily done. But I do highly recommend if you want printing these symbols in your classroom and then you start to feel more comfortable using them and your students feel comfortable unpacking them. And again, unpacking a whole lesson saying, what does this mean to you? Or how do you like to learn? Or if we're using symbols and images, what do you think that means to you? Or evaluating your lesson with your students and say, hey, we've done this. Which one of these symbols do you think we touched on today? And did this help you learn? Is really powerful tool as well. So assignment 2 is coming very soon, Sunday the 7th of December. Please make sure you look at the right portal that you are putting your submission into, the right Turnitin link. It is that Sunday, 7th, 11:59 p.m. Your 3 questions, making sure, I know it is a reflective piece of writing, but you're keeping that academic tone. So it is okay when you're referring to I, obviously you need to because it is a reflective piece. Making sure you might want to go back through to not this week's workshop, but last week's workshop when I unpacked those different elements so that you can use to join some sentences together to make sure you're still keeping it in that academic tone, and that you've got your reference list easily just at the end. You can have reflection question 1 or you can have the whole question there and then you type underneath it. Some people may struggle to really reflect within 500 words. Just be concise about what you are using. If you notice maybe you're breaking down too much information, according to NESA, maybe you can break down some of that and make sure you're really using that reflection on you as well. Any questions that I can help support you with, or any questions about the assignment? I can see Georgia shaking her head. Love it. Karen.
I've got two just questions, and like you just said, I'm having difficulty fitting all of my thoughts into the 500 words. So I focused predominantly, like I've only done question 1 and 2 at the moment, predominantly on the part that I feel like has been, well, say I'll just use number 1 as an example, the part that's been most influential to my learning. I don't feel like you can really go into too much else. So if I'm just focusing on one that I think it's really like it's the self-reflection part. I think that is really vital. Would you bother referencing anything else?
Well, no. So if you've focused heavily on one thing, you're unpacking how that really has impacted your understanding. That's totally fine.
And the other question I had is, I noticed that it says like 3 to 6 scholarly references for each one. I have references, but I just realized I've only got the readings from the subject, but I have references to like a lot of government websites and papers that we read through. Like, do you mean just references, or should I be looking for more scholarly references?
So if you've used any of those readings, they're your scholarly literature, so that's totally fine. And then those government documents would be your grey literature, which again is totally fine. So what we're looking for in your reflective writing is if you're using that in text citation to be like, okay, yep, they've used 1, 2, 3, and even 4, 5, 6. So as long as you're in text referencing within your reflection, you're fine.
Yeah, but is it like 3 to 6 per question of
Yes, 3 to 6 per question. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
That's okay. Any other questions that I can help you with? If not, happy week 5. Hopefully you don't have a busy weekend ahead of you and you're able to smash out a lot of work. But good luck, and I will see you all Monday at the workshop. If you have any questions, chuck it up onto Blackboard discussion or anything personal, please reach out to me via email. And I hope you have a lovely Wednesday, everyone, and I'll see you again next week.
Thanks a lot, Maddie.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.